All right, here we are again. All right, so we're in chapter 8, although we just barely started it. I do have a couple more videos that we want to look at, and then we can carry on with 8. Let me get 8 open here. 8, of course, as you know, is our discussion about the natural level of GDP and, potential GDP, or the natural rate of level of GDP and the natural unemployment rate. But we're looking at it, as we mentioned earlier, from the perspective of at least 3 different schools of thought, and then we'll carry on to discuss some other important concepts that will help us understand this a little bit better. And all right, so let's look at the videos first, and then we'll get back to where we were. So the first one,
Chapter are we on?
what are we on?
What chapter are we on?
This is the beginning of 8.
Okay.
All right, so this is 8. And now, let's see, here we go. So we're going to be looking at what's called real business cycle theory, which is another alternative to these other theories we've been looking at. The monetarists, for example, the Keynesians, the Austrians. What's different about real business cycle theory is that it is a relatively new area of thought about how business cycles are generated. And the word real is kind of an important hint as to what it's all about. We're looking at business cycle theory, but we're thinking in terms of real variables rather than nominal. And finally, at the end, there's a discussion here about the Great Recession. Well, we'll see what that's all about in a few minutes. Then we'll get into 8, and we'll just take it from there. All right. So let me, as usual, send this over to you, this link, and then we'll check this out. All right, let's pause the sharing and then let's watch it.
Of that.
Oh, what is that for? Is everyone done watching the video?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Now, the one thing they did talk about, which we haven't done yet, is they showed a set of graphs, which we haven't really considered yet. That should come later on. It's called aggregate supply and demand. The word aggregate just means total. What they're basically doing is they're using supply and demand curves to represent the entire economy as opposed to individual goods. And so that's really all that that was all about. They're showing you how when there's a negative shock, like rising oil prices or like a flood, of the Nile back in ancient Egypt, those are what they would define as real supply shocks, meaning the supply curve shifts to the left. And of course, that makes prices go up and output go down. So what they're really doing in this theory is trying to get away from the monetarists who are basically blaming everything on the supply of money and trying to explain it more in terms of what they're calling real shocks, which are actual changes in the production of goods and services. So they're very, very different theories. Now, of course, a lot of research is dedicated to try to figure out which ones are the most accurate. And as you can imagine, there's very little consensus about which one is the best choice of theory about the business cycle. A lot of them, of these theories, have a lot of good things to say, but it would be very difficult to say that one of them is clearly better than the others. So this is one of the things about economics that makes it very different from other social sciences. Well, not really. I mean, social sciences by definition are areas where it's very difficult to conduct actual experiments, unlike the physical sciences, where if we're not sure, let's say if two particular chemicals will explode if we bring them together, we can prove it just by carrying out experiments in physics. We can't really do that with economics. So the best we can really hope for is to develop theories that seem to conform with the real world. Anyway, so there's one more I have here where they're going to be talking about the what they are calling the Great Recession, which took place about 10 or 12 years ago in response to the bursting of the housing bubble in the United States. And so why don't we take a look at that one and see how they analyze it. Hold on one second. Let's send this over there. All right, let's check this out.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right, are we all done?
Yeah.
Well, you know what's interesting about this? So they chose the what he's calling the Great Recession of 2008-9 to illustrate the thoughts. Oh, I've forgotten. What did we say? It was Thursday, wasn't it? Honestly, I have to look it up now. I'm pretty sure that we said Thursday because I think that's when I posted it. So yeah, Thursday
Posted it
night.
on Friday, actually.
Oh, Friday. All right, Friday then. You can have till Friday to do it.
Thank
All
you.
right. So it's not today, that's for sure. But anyway, yes. So he mentioned he called it the Great Recession in 2008. You're welcome. you might recall, well, maybe you don't, because it was about 12 or 13 years ago, we had a major housing bubble in the United States. Housing prices were going through the roof. And I mean, normally, yes, send it in by email. Take a picture of your every page that you've written on, and then send me a picture of it by email. It should work just fine with your camera phone. But before you send it, make sure that you can read it yourself, because if you can't read it, I can't read it. All right. Even though the phones really are of a very high quality in this day and age, that doesn't guarantee that the photographer is going to take a good picture, does it? No. So just make sure, because I've received pictures before where the writing was smudgy and it was unclear. Maybe the lighting was poor, or the person wasn't close enough, or their hand was shaking, or there's a lot of possible reasons why it might not look very clear. So just, take a look at the pictures when you take them. And if you can read them, at least on the computer, you may not be able to read it that well on the actual camera, but if you copy it onto your hard drive and open it up as a JPEG file, it should be readable. And if it's not, just take the pictures again and then submit them by email. And of course, make sure your name's on everything. And that's all you have to do. Yes, go ahead.
Can we send it like a PDF file?
PDF is perfect. That's fine too. It doesn't have to be a JPEG. If you turn it into PDF, so much the better. Again, just make sure that it's legible.
Okay.
All right. And also, you know what I've discovered too? I don't know how this happens, but I would sometimes, let's say a person had 3 pages front and back worth of work, and they would take the pictures and send them to me. And somehow I only ended up with the pages 1, 3, and 5. I honestly can't figure out how that could have happened, but just make sure that when you're done, I can see everything you've done. All right. So if I can't read it, I'll just let you know. But I would ideally like them all to be crystal clear so I can see them all when they're all handed in. All right. So I'm sure everyone's very skilled with their camera phones, but you may not have ever actually used them on a document before. Just watch out. There's certain things to watch out for. Be careful about the lighting. Sometimes there's glare that makes it very hard to read a document. And also, if your handwriting is really tiny, for example, you might want to increase the size, or just be careful. That's all. Just make sure you can read it before you send it to me, and then you can just send it by email, and then I'll collect them all and correct them. All right. So it won't be that hard. Now, if you have a scanner, I mean, if you have a printer in your house, it might have a scanner, and then you can scan it into a PDF file. And that's maybe even a better choice, just because it's all together in one place. But if not, that's okay. Just take pictures and it should be fine. Now, if there's a lot of I don't remember exactly how many graphs are in this one. In principle, the only part that really needs to be drawn out by hand is the graphs. You can type the rest. Or if you're on top of the technology, you can use Genius Scan app, which I know nothing about. What exactly is that again? Yes.
Basically, like you could take pictures of something with your phone and it scans it as if you put it through a printer scanner.
I see. Oh, you know what? I
Okay.
have it. I just found, I must have, didn't somebody mention this to me last week? Yeah, go ahead, Noah.
For the test, I would typing accommodation. Do I need to email you that, or can I just type it? Do you need me to email you a reminder, or can I just type it?
No, I think I've got a reminder sent to me by the school. It's okay.
Okay, I just wanted to check if I needed to email you about that or not.
You can insert, like when you send me the email, just type in a little message. Don't forget about the accommodation. That's good enough.
Okay, because I'm still gonna have to do by hand all the graphs and stuff, but for the definitions and stuff, I'm gonna type it.
That's right. In fact, you're probably better off typing it whenever possible.
Yeah, and I have terrible handwriting, that's why.
Yeah. It's faster, and it's like you said, it's easier to read it. So I would encourage you to type in a Word, let's say Word document or whatever. Oh, you know what that reminds me? One more thing. If you are going to send me a document, like for example, suppose you decide to type up your answers except for the graphs. Don't use a PC product. Well, let's see. Now, how does this work? Maybe you technology people can help me out with this. I know that, of course, PCs have Word, and actually so does the Mac. Word is the word processor used by Microsoft, but Apple has its own version, which I think is called Pages. And so the way apparently this works is I don't have a Mac, but I do have an iPad. And it's really a top of the line iPad. I think that if you send me Pages, I can open it up on the iPad, but I've never actually tried to do this. So what I would encourage you to do is if you are using a Mac, try to use products that are compatible with both. But if you do forget, I might, and I've never tried to do this before, remember, be able to open it up on the iPad and read it that way. But let's just try to avoid that if possible. Okay. Just because I can't guarantee you that I'll be able to read it. I think I can, but I don't know that for a fact. All right. So, but yes, Genius Scan is something that I believe somebody else mentioned to me last time because I found it just now on my iPhone. So what does it do? You just scan it over with your hand?
You just take a picture of the document and it scans it just as well as if you put it on top of a printer.
Kidding. You mean even better than if you use your camera phone?
Yeah, it scans it better.
No kidding. Wow. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm glad you mentioned that because I do see it here in my list of apps. You must have mentioned it last time and I forgot. If it does a better job, then I'll in the future try to recommend to everybody that they use this instead. I'm kind of intrigued. I'll tell you what, make sure, Jessica, use it on Genius Scan so I can see the difference. I'm really kind of dying to know now. Look at this. And it's even telling me that I can back up these documents in the clouds. Wow, man, what a product. And it's free. How is it free? How do these people make money? Does anyone understand that?
Nope.
Okay, I don't either. But oh, it said here 2 people are raising their hands. Oh, here we go. Oh, here we go. More technology. On Google Docs, you can go to insert drawing and create a graph electronically. Oh, wow. No kidding.
Yeah, I was gonna say that it's like pretty much everyone is using Google Docs right now. So and is able to open with any devices. It doesn't
I
have to
see.
be a Apple, Android, or anything.
I see. Yeah, somebody in my other class mentioned that, and I reminded them that I'm at least 12 years behind the technology curve. So I'm not surprised to hear that. In fact, I asked somebody in the other class, it was something about Word or Office, and he said, "Oh no, I don't use Office. I use Google Docs." And I was like, "What do you mean? Isn't that just a file sharing thing?" So apparently it has its own versions of Word and Excel, doesn't it? I've never tried to use them. In fact, I'm still trying to figure out how to read them. If you send me a Google Doc, how will I know that I have it?
It's gonna be like a link, and you press it, and it will take you to the doc straight.
Okay, but I mean, does it come in my email?
Yeah.
So there'll be an email that says, "Oh, here you go. You have a Google Doc. Just click this link and you'll be right there."
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. Is that easier than using Word or one
I
of the
think
other?
it's easier. You could also like share it as a PDF from the Google Doc itself. Like when you want to share it to your email, I could share it to you like a PDF file.
Oh, see, now I didn't even know there was such a thing as VDF. What does that stand for?
No, PDF,
Oh,
PDF.
PDF. Oh, I'm sorry, PDF. Okay. So in others, you're saying that this Google Docs can create PDF files.
Yes.
Okay, I'm making a note of this because I need to know these things, especially because people will assume, this is one thing I've noticed, people will assume that I know how this stuff works. And they're usually wrong. Okay. I don't want you to, like send your work to me and I can't find it or see it. But as long as you show me, if you tell me what to do, I will be able to handle it. All right. I do want to learn this stuff. It's just that I don't know how. I mean, the thing is, the people that I know are just as ignorant about the technology as I am, and so I don't find out these things unless people in my classes tell me. So all right. So whatever technology seems to work, you can feel free to use it, but you may, with the caveat that you might have to explain to me how to use it. Now, like when that Genius Scan thing comes, is it going to come in my email?
It's basically the same as sending pictures. So I would basically just handwrite everything and then take
Uh-huh.
pictures of it and send it to you.
All right, and it'll come in my email like anything else would, and it's just links.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll send it in an email.
Nice. All right, man. All this good stuff that we have now in this day and age. So yeah, before you know it, I'll only be 7 years behind the technology curve. That'll be nice. But it's a struggle. It's a struggle, as you can tell. I don't have my cell phone in my hand 24 hours a day either, which isn't helping things. Like my nieces and nephews, oh my God, and their iPads, they never put them down. And so they know more about this stuff than I do. All right, anyway, so let's get back to it. So whatever you've got, whatever you want to use, if you want to use Google Docs, that's fine. If you want to use Genius Scan, that's fine. As long as, like I said, if I can read it, it's fine. All right, so is everybody happy? Everyone has their plan of attack? The only thing you might run into is you may have to, if you have a drawing, you just do what you have to do. Most likely you'll end up just drawing it on a piece of paper and taking a picture of it. But whatever you need to do, go right ahead. If you just for some reason happen to have some expertise in using the drawing tools of Word, you can feel free to use those too, but I wouldn't assume that because it takes a while to learn how to do that. And let's say for some reason you're majoring in graphic design. Ooh, you could do some beautiful documents, but failing that, let's just use whatever you want to use, but I'm using Word, as you can tell. And I'm trying to desperately learn these new technologies, but I'm sure you run into this with your parents all the time. Do your parents know much about the technology? Does anyone here have parents who really are on top of it? No, not really. Do you have to find yourself having to explain it to them?
All the time.
Yeah. I feel their pain. Don't you worry. I get it. And believe me, I have no pride. If my 6-year-old niece has to show me something on the iPhone that I don't know, I'm okay with that. I don't care that she's only 6. If she knows and I don't, I'm going to let her tell me all about it. Okay. All right. Well, anyway. Well, that's a good point. Not every single person who's under 30, let's say, knows the technology. It's not every single person, but in general, let's just say that most young people, like we know, love the technology. They learn it very quickly. And that's just the way it is now. It wasn't always like that. The reason why this is happening is because the technology changes so rapidly. In ancient times, when technology advanced more slowly, it wasn't common for, adults and children basically learn the technology at around the same pace. But now that it moves so quickly, the advantage swings to the younger people who learn it very, very quickly. Anyway, so let's get back to the notes. This technology is so exciting, we could spend the whole class talking about it, but I guess we better not. All right, so let's see where we were. So potential GDP and the natural unemployment rate. So we already know what this is all about. But first, let's take a look at these 3 schools very quickly. Classical, now whenever you see the word classical, being used to describe any school of thought in economics, it typically refers to the people who came along during the 19th century and maybe possibly the 18th century, whose focus was on free markets and making sure that markets were as efficient as possible. And they believed that any issues that arose in the economy could be corrected by the economy if it was simply left alone to do its thing. Okay, so in other words, if unemployment were to rise in the 19th century, then rather than everybody getting laid off, wages would start to drop, and then the problem would take care of itself. Not so much anymore. Wages are what we call sticky, meaning that you get a certain wage, and either you get to keep your job at that wage rate, or else your job simply disappears. There doesn't seem to be anything else out there. In other words, it's not the case that if your company's in trouble, they would lower everybody's salary by 10%. Instead, they just get rid of 10% of the labor force. So the classicals are writing at a time when that wasn't necessarily true. And I think we may have discussed this gentleman before, but the founder really of the entire discipline of economics was Adam Smith. And in 1776, he wrote his masterpiece, The Wealth of Nations. And so it's one of those books that's like so path-breaking that really, when you come right down to it, almost everything that followed was somehow based on the wealth of nations. That's where the field of economics really got started. In fact, when Adam Smith was writing, there was no such thing. In fact, the field that he said he was officially listed as a professor of moral philosophy at the University of Glasgow, I think. And so economics itself was considered to be simply another version of or type of philosophy when he was writing. And it wasn't really till much later that the name economics was even coined to describe this discipline. And even then, for many, many years, decades really, there was no distinction made between macroeconomics and microeconomics. It was a meaningless distinction. And that really changed during the Depression when we saw Keynes, which we'll discuss again in a few minutes, who wrote extensively about how to get the country out of the Depression. And mainly what he advocated was massive increases in government spending to stimulate the economy and get it back out of the Depression. And when Keynes was writing in the 30s, that's when the field of macroeconomics was really considered to be born, because his focus was exclusively on big picture items like spending and taxes and inflation and unemployment, whereas previously economists were all just considered to be economists. So, economics has a very interesting history of its own. A lot of key figures in this field were quite interesting for their own sake. Anyway, so here, when we look at the classical macro and micro, for that matter, economists, they all had an enormous amount of faith in free markets. Okay, they're very skeptical about government. Then, and of course, if that's the case, then letting government take care of problems is going to be very inefficient. And so their policy prescriptions usually were to basically let the economy correct itself and only use government intervention as an absolute last resort. The Keynesians, of course, were based on John Maynard Keynes, who came along during the 30s. And mainly he was trying to explain what to do about the Depression. And he felt that the government's job is to make sure that the amount of, as he called it, aggregate demand is always at a fairly high level. Because if not, then that's when the economy tends to slip into a recession or even a depression. So let me just briefly take a side note here. When he says the words aggregate demand, he means spending on the four components of GDP, which you recall are consumer spending, government spending, investment spending, and net exports. Okay, so when he says aggregate demand, what he's basically saying is that if there's a slump in consumer spending for some reason, or if there's less investment spending by businesses, or if our trade deficit gets worse, or if for some reason the government spends less, all of that will reduce aggregate demand. And so a reduction, especially a sharp reduction in aggregate demand, according to Keynes, is what is responsible for a downturn or any downturns in the business cycle. So his policy prescription was for government to pick up the slack. In other words, he thought that whenever aggregate demand slowed down, Keynes would recommend that the government increase spending and or cut taxes to bring aggregate demand back to a more normal level. So in other words, he saw government spending as a type of shock absorber that was designed to keep aggregate demand from slumping too much. Now, the thing that Keynes did say, though, which his followers did not really think, I mean, you know, as after Keynes died, his philosophy lived on for quite a few decades. And his followers didn't seem to understand in a lot of cases that Keynes also felt that when the economy was strong, in other words, aggregate demand was strong, that the government should stop spending so much. So, and then let me move this on to the next slide here, as to avoid overheating the economy and triggering a great deal of inflation. This is the part that his followers ignored. In other words, after he died, all the politicians who got elected to government calling themselves Keynesians, they thought that their number one job was to always increase government spending no matter what was going on in the economy. And so because later Keynesian politicians kept spending regardless of the state of the economy, eventually in the 70s at least, both inflation and unemployment rose to on almost unprecedented levels, which Keynes had predicted could never happen. So this is when Keynes, I guess the bloom came off the rose of Keynesianism. Up to that point, it seemed like this magical policy prescription where anytime there was a problem in the economy, just increase government spending and everything would be happy. But it eventually caught up with them and they kept increasing and increasing and increasing spending. And before you knew it, by the 70s, all of a sudden we've got both inflation and unemployment, which according to Keynes should never have been able to happen. So that's when they started to lose a lot of their credibility. And that's actually when the monetarist school suddenly became really, really popular, because the monetarist school has a lot to say about what to do about inflation. Okay, so the monetarists, they would have said, this is insanity. You cannot keep stimulating aggregate demand even when the economy is strong. You're just going to create a lot of inflation. And so their prescription was to sharply increase interest rates in the early 80s to wring inflation out of the economy. So let's just throw this in here. Their policy prescription is to ensure that money supply grows at a stable, predictable rate that is consistent with low inflation and steady growth. So in the early 80s, or actually the late 1970s, when inflation was very high and unemployment was also very high, the monetarists recommended sharp increases in interest rates that would reduce the rate of inflation to more normal levels. Okay. And in fact, by the time in 1979, it's hard to imagine this now, the US inflation rate was 13.3%, which is just beyond belief. Where now, I mean, it's pretty standard that our inflation rate is essentially 2% or even less. Right now, it's about 1.5%. Just the idea of 13.3% inflation is beyond belief. And so unfortunately, this caused a great deal of unemployment for the next few years. Which is what the monetarists would have predicted anyway. But it did succeed in reducing inflation about 2% where it is now. So in other words, it was a very painful period for everybody, but it worked. In other words, all of a sudden, this 13.3% dropped off to about 2. And so this is when the monetarist influence was at its absolute peak in government, because their recommendations had led to a dramatic reduction in inflation in a fairly short period of time, considering how serious the problem really was. Now, of course, once the inflation rate fell, then unemployment started to fall as well. And in the 80s, the US experienced one of the strongest economic recoveries that it ever had. So the 80s were like a golden time for the economy. US economy was incredibly strong. I mean, it was just booming on all cylinders, it was insanely strong. And so this is when the monetarist influence was at its absolute peak. And now, of course, like all schools, it comes and goes in popularity. Later on, the real business cycle people came along and they decided that, this monetarism is okay as far as it goes, but it doesn't really help explain some of the later recessions that happened in the 90s in particular. So, these theories come and go in popularity. They have their heyday and then they start to people start losing interest in them. And so there'll always be more new theories that come along about how business cycles actually work, that because none of these theories can ever completely explain everything. It doesn't work that way. And also, unlike with physics, where let's say certain relationships always hold no matter what happens, in the economy, a lot of what was true maybe in the 20s and 30s is no longer true now. So theories that were valid in the past may no longer be valid today because conditions change. Like the rapid acceleration of technology today makes it possible to have very high rates of productivity that were not possible before. And so a lot of these theories that were developed before this happened might no longer be valid. All right, so the thing about economic theory is that it's interesting, but it evolves over time. It's never going to reach a point where it's completely 100%, this is it, let's not change it. Like with physics, like the laws of motion and all this and that, those have been proven to be correct and they're not going to change. Whereas here, economic conditions can change very quickly. And so theories, like I said, that used to make sense might not make so much sense anymore. But anyway, so let's take a look at potential GDP, which we've already introduced as being the output that we can reach as long as everything is being used as efficiently as possible. Okay, that means no waste. And so that also implies that there's no cyclical unemployment in the economy. We can still have structural and we can still have frictional, but we cannot have any cyclical if we're at what we will now call full employment. All right. So the word full doesn't literally mean full, it means no cyclical unemployment. So if anybody's still out of work, it's because either they're temporarily between jobs or else it's because their skill set is so poor that they just plain cannot find a job, no matter what's going on in the economy. Those are the people who need more training before they can get back into the job market. All right. So, and this includes, there's a lot of reasons why this can happen. It may be the problem is that you don't have a lot of education, or maybe you don't have a lot of training, or maybe you don't speak English very well, or maybe you don't read very well, or maybe you have a skill that's now obsolete. There's a lot of reasons why people could fall into this category. So for them, the answer is not to stimulate the economy, but to give them more training so that they can learn how to do something different. Anyway, so at any given point in time, we're going to assume that, well, in economics, we call this the short run, when we're going to assume that all the factors of production except labor are fixed. All right, in the short run, if you want to expand the size of your business, the only way you can do that is to hire more workers. In the short run, you have a fixed amount of land, capital, and entrepreneurship to work with. In the long run, we assume that everything can be changed. Okay, everything is flexible. But here in the short run, only labor can be changed. And you can see why. I mean, how easy is it to hire people? It doesn't take that long compared to buying new land or acquiring new equipment or, that kind of thing. It's a lot quicker, isn't it? And also it goes in the other direction too. If your company's in trouble, it's easy to get rid of people. Much
Just
easier. Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
sorry. I wanted to say, I remember the meaning of the factors of production. The land is for rent, the labor is for wages, the capital is for interest, and the entrepreneurship is for profits.
Yeah, that's correct. Wages are paid to labor, land earns rent, capital earns interest, and entrepreneurship earns profits. That's correct. Now, of course, these are very general terms. I mean, if you own capital, capital equipment, let's say that Starbucks leases its espresso machines from the company that makes them. They're actually paying to the company that owns them. They're making payments. I don't know if interest is really the best name for those payments, but the owners of the capital are getting paid for the use of their capital. So in economics, we traditionally refer to it as interest, although it's not the same interest that you get from a bank account. So, but it's just been traditional to use the word interest to describe that. Same thing with land. Yes, actual land could be rented, but land includes all natural resources. So like if you are buying minerals from a mining company to run your business, you could theoretically call that rent, but you're essentially buying those minerals, but we still call it rent. It's just a very general term. It doesn't necessarily mean like renting an apartment, let's say. Although with entrepreneurship, we know that that's profit, all right. I don't know what else you would call it. When you look at Jeff Bezos' bank account, you see all that profit that he made by making or creating Amazon. I forgot. We lost track of how wealthy Jeff is these days. Let's see what we can find out. Didn't Elon Musk go past him recently? I think he did.
Yes.
Yeah, I believe so.
Elon got ahead of those two guys. So we got Jeff is only, it doesn't say though. I want to see the numbers. Come on. That's the exciting part. The numbers, I don't care the ranks. Elon.
There it is.
197 billion. All right. So not bad, huh? I'd like to have that. Yeah. And then Jeff is at only a measly 182. All right. He did literally he was actually selling books out of his garage. That's how he got started. Yeah, but the thing is about Bezos is that he had the idea that people might be willing to buy merchandise on the internet, which was brand new really at the time. The interesting thing about the internet is that it was actually developed by the military quite a while, way back, maybe in the 40s even, as a way for the different, let's say they wanted to make sure that all the different units of the military could stay in touch with each other, even if electricity and, even if normal communications have been knocked out. It was really meant for military purposes. And then it really started to become available to people, individual people in the 90s. So when Jeff Bezos comes along, most people still don't even have a desktop. And in fact, laptops, I don't think had been invented yet. And people are just starting to get used to the idea of the internet, which had very little content at the time. And his idea was, you know what, if we had this nice website full of wonderful merchandise, maybe people would be willing to buy from us instead of going to a bookstore. And that's how all this got started. And that's, in the beginning, that's literally all they had. It's hard to imagine that now. I mean, is there anything you cannot buy on Amazon? I don't know. By the way, does it seem to you like it does to me that the older he gets, the more he looks like Dr. Evil? Everyone knows Dr. Evil? That movie isn't that old, is it? What movie am I referring to?
Austin Powers.
That's right. That's right. So does he look like Dr. Evil?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
sort of see it.
Yeah,
It's the shaved
that-
head.
yeah, look at him. Deep down, we know that he's really Dr. Evil. Look at him. No. But all right. Anyway, so let's see. 3 is Bill Gates. Now, Bill Gates has been out of the public eye for a while. He used to be in the news all the time. He, of course, created Microsoft. He's worth 132 billion. He stepped down from the company quite a while ago, as a matter of fact. I don't know what he does all day long, but he's not running the company anymore, that's for sure. He actually dropped out of Harvard to start that company. I guess it was the right move, huh?
It's
Man.
his foundation now.
Oh, that's right. Okay. All right. Well, that makes sense. I don't know. 65. All right. Now, oh, does anyone know this guy, Bernard Arnault? Christian Dior. Oh, all right. I didn't know. 90. Wow. 109 billion. Mark. we
He
know-
owns Tiffany's now too.
Oh, does he? Oh, I didn't know that. Really? Wow. Zuckerberg. Yeah. My niece's husband actually works for Facebook. I wanted to ask him. I never got a chance to ask him if Mark is a very strange person, but I guess I didn't get the chance. He had this idea. I think he was also at Harvard when he had this idea. So God, look at these guys. He dropped out of Harvard to create this business.
The social network.
Right. It was the social. That's right. And that's what it grew into. Look at him. Jeez. Now, Warren, everybody knows Warren. What is he famous for? Investing. He did all this on his own. I mean, he didn't have any money. His family had no money. This is all from his insanely good stock picking skills. And he really, he knows what he's doing. If he gives you investment advice, you listen to him. In fact, I actually, one of my degrees is from a school that is now part of NYU. It was called at the time Brooklyn Polytechnic University. It was an engineering school. And several years ago, one of their faculty members, who was a professor of chemical engineering, he died. He was single. He left all his money to the school in his will. And the school heard about it and they thought, well, that's nice of him. But they probably figured it wasn't a whole lot of money. So when the will was read, it turned out that this guy was worth $200 million. How in the world did he do that on his professor's salary? Well, guess what? Guess who his next door neighbor was when he grew up as a boy in Omaha, Nebraska? Right there, Warren Buffett. Warren, when he got this job at Poly, Warren said, listen, old friend, I'll manage your money for you, okay? He said, sure, Warren, go ahead. And before he knew it, he dies a multi-millionaire. That shows you how talented this guy is, Warren Buffett. Oh, okay. I don't know him. Zhang Shan. Okay. Larry Page. I don't. Oh, he was one of the co-founders of Google. Well, that explains that. Then we have, one of the other co-founders of Google. And Larry Ellison, who founded Oracle, which is basically a databases and hardware and stuff like that. Oh, he dropped out of Chicago to start his company. What is there about these guys who keep dropping out of these top schools? I don't know. But anyway, Elon is on top at the moment. But his lead is fairly slim, though. You never know. One small dip in the stock market and Jeff could be right back on top. Wow. All right. Anyway, so that's what entrepreneurship is all about. That's what you're aiming for. And so anyway, as the quantity of labor employed changes, of course, GDP will change as well. So we're going to introduce a very important graph here. It's called the production function. And basically what it does is it shows us how much output can be produced with different quantities of labor. Now, here what we're going to do is look at a very small example. This is a small company that makes soda. All right, it's a very special soda. Let's say it's something that's unique to this company. Nobody else has it. So it's very popular, but it's only available in a small part of the country. And so they make soda in this factory. And so this chart tells me how many workers are in the company on the left and how many gallons of soda they can make on the right. So this is a classic, what we call production function. Now, if you look at it very, very carefully, you'll notice some important details. First of all, how much soda can we produce when we have no employees? None. It hasn't quite gotten to the point yet where robots can do everything. They're getting there. There are actually apparently warehouses that Amazon owns where all the employees are robots, but all they do is go into the warehouse and look for merchandise when it's ordered. People don't have to be involved in something like that. Once the first person comes in the door, now we can start making the soda. And the first person working there generates 3 gallons a day. All right. Now here comes the second person and the output jumps up from 3 to 8. All of a sudden we gained 5 gallons. Now, how did this happen? You would think maybe it would double, but instead it more than doubled. What's going on here? How could this be? Well, the magic word here is specialization. Okay, just like countries can specialize in the goods in which they have a comparative advantage, people can specialize in jobs in which they have a comparative advantage. So let's say, as an example, I don't really know enough about soda making to make up an example. Let's think about a McDonald's. Suppose that a McDonald's, a small McDonald's, has only 1 employee. Okay, this employee must take all the orders and also cook all the food. How efficient is this likely to be?
Not.
You got the same, this poor person is just taking the orders, then running in the back and cooking away and then bringing the food in the front. And then they start the process all over again. So the smart owner of this McDonald's says, you know, this is kind of ridiculous. Why don't we try this? What happens if a second employee is hired? Aha. Now, so would they have both people taking orders and cooking?
No,
What would they do instead?
one would take the orders and one would be cooking.
That's right. One employee can now specialize in cooking, and the other can specialize in taking orders. Okay, well, the result will be, as a result, output may increase, may more than double, or may increase by more than 100% because of specialization. So one guy can stay back there and just cook all day, and the other employee can take the orders. And of course, you know, you would make sure that the one who knows how to cook would be in the back cooking, and the one who's very friendly with the customers would work up in the front and take the orders and who gets details. So all of a sudden, because of the specialization, there's more than twice as much output. If I get a third employee in there now, they can go either to the back and help with the cooking or stand in the front and help with the order taking. But I think you'll agree that the additional benefit of a third employee is maybe not quite as much as the second employee, where most of the extra benefit comes from. So because of that, the output will grow quickly, but maybe not 5. Here, it only goes up by 4. Okay, and here initially it went up by 3. So it helps having a third person, and we certainly want them. But now what's going to start happening is, remember, it's a small McDonald's. They've got one cash register. They've got one, fryer. They've got one, thing to cook hamburgers on. So if there's a second employee, they both are sharing the same equipment. I mean, a third employee, sorry. A third employee will not increase output as much as the second employee due to constraints on equipment, or capital equipment, that is, and space. There's only so much room in there, okay? So it's a small one, a really small one, okay? So while there's more output, the additional benefit is not quite as much, because even if the third employee is just as productive as the second, there's a limit on how much they can do with the same equipment. And the same thing now, if there's a fourth employee, will not increase output as much as the third employee for the same reasons. Whoops. Okay, and in fact, the problem is getting worse. You've got more people waiting to use the same equipment and less space. And so before you know it, in fact, let's look at our chart again and take a look at what's happening. The fourth employee adds only 2 more units of output. And then all of a sudden it gets to the point where we're so crowded, the fifth employee adds no extra output, and the sixth employee actually makes things worse. Oh my God. Well, now that's not what we wanted. So what we're seeing here, and again, keep in mind, this is in the short run. We don't have time or the ability to get more equipment, to increase the size of our facilities. In the long run, none of this is going to be a problem, because what we would probably do is, in addition to hiring more labor, we would also buy more equipment or upgrade the equipment, or increase the size of the store. But here it's just the labor that's changing, and so the productivity is going down very quickly after peaking out with this second employee. So what we're seeing here is known as, this illustrates what is known as the law of diminishing returns, which you've probably heard of before. It means that as we put more and more labor into this McDonald's, the extra output increases more and more slowly, and eventually it actually starts to become negative. Wow, what an important concept this is. In fact, if you were to draw up a list of the 10 most important concepts in economics, this would absolutely belong on that list. Now, just as an aside, you've all experienced this yourselves. In fact, why don't we jump ahead here and remind, because it's already down here somewhere, I just want you to see that according to this law, as more resources are used with at least one fixed factor of production, at first output increases at an increasing rate due to specialization. In fact, let me sneak that in here. Output then increases at a decreasing rate due to constraints on resources. Eventually output reaches a maximum value and then it declines continuously. This is what we mean by the law of diminishing returns. Okay, now, why do I say that you've experienced this yourselves? Ooh. All right, so this is what's happening when we have one variable resource, all the rest are fixed. And so this is the important detail here is this. Actually, let me go back and revisit our chart. What this means then is that in the short run, in order to produce more soda, we have to charge a progressively higher price because the costs of producing the soda are going up. Why are they going up? Because now keep in mind, we're assuming that each of these laborers is getting paid the same wage. So if every time I hire a new person, the extra output goes up just a little less, then the cost of each gallon of soda is actually going up. And we'll see that later on. But this means that in order to make more of my product, I have to charge a higher price. And in fact, this is one of the main reasons why the supply curve is upward sloping, because I have to get a higher price in order to produce more output. Because look what's happening to my productivity. It's going down as I keep trying to make more and more soda. So I have to be compensated for it with a higher price. All right, so this is such an important idea. It helps explain why the supply curve is upward sloping in the first place. Now, there's a graph that we can use to illustrate what's going on here. Now, the one you're going to see is drawn in Excel, so it's not perfect, but it does show the highlights of what we need to know or take away from this chart. All right, so what does this thing look like? This graph is called the total product curve. So what we're trying to show you is that initially there's no output, and then output increases. Let's try that again. At first, output increases. At an increasing rate. Then it increases at a decreasing rate. And then once it hits the peak, output actually decreases. So that means we're not going to go past this point, no matter, even if the labor is free, we're not going to actually hire the sixth worker because they're actually reducing our output through no fault of their own. We peak out of 5 workers. And in fact, we're not going to hire the 5th worker because unless they're working for free, because the 4th and 5th workers are actually producing the same output. So we'll have to choose the number of workers based on how much they're being paid and how much we can sell the soda for. But we can be sure that we're not going to hire more workers if the total gain in output is either 0 or negative. It just isn't going to happen. So this whole curve is known as the total product curve. TP stands for total product. Mm-hmm. All right, so I'll give a minute to catch up, and then we'll take it from there. Now, we can also make the following claims with the same curve. Let me just show you, let me insert one more graph here. Let's see if I can copy this. Okay, I wanted a clean copy here. What I wanted to show you here is that points on this curve, let's say this is, I can call them anything, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And then let's add a couple more, like H will be up here somewhere. Thursday, no, Friday. We decided that it's Friday. Okay. It took me a while to get that thing posted, so you can have until Friday. And then let's call this point I. Okay. Yeah, Friday. We've got time. Now, the points A through G represent maximum efficiency. Point I is inefficient, which means it's wasteful, of course. H is what we'd like, but H is unattainable with the current resources. Just like with our PPF curve, production possibilities frontier, you can see points on the curve are at maximum efficiency, above is unattainable, and below is inefficient. Now, what happens if something changes? Let's say that for whatever reason, let's say the technology that we use to make the soda, which the technology is actually quite impressive. As a matter of fact, there are shows on TV where you can actually watch this happening. One of them is called Modern Marvels, and it focuses a lot on the production of food. And in fact, I was just watching it yesterday, and they were showing how Wise makes their potato chips. And you figure, well, potato chips, how high tech can that possibly be? But there's a ton of machinery involved at every step along the way, and it is fast. You'd be almost shocked to see how fast they can churn out those potato chips, but it's because they've made massive investments in this very, very expensive, very advanced equipment, like a machine that peels the potatoes very, very quickly, or a machine that slices them very, very quickly, and the one that where you fry them, and the one where you put in the salt, and the one that rejects the bad ones. There's all these machines going on. So what happens in our little soda factory if we find ourselves acquiring more advanced equipment? Well, what's going to happen is that we can produce more output with the same resources. And so as a result, the technological progress causes the total product curve to shift up. Okay, the whole curve is higher now. This is with advanced technology. This is the original curve. So what can cause this is, among other things, more advanced technology. The machinery has gotten even better. It's like if Wise potato chips, they update their equipment so that it can peel the potatoes even faster, and it can salt them even faster, and it can slice them even faster. Then they'll have more potato chips than ever before. And this is what's going to happen. The whole thing shifts up because, let's say, for example, with 4 employees, the soda company previously could only make 14 gallons of soda. Now, all of a sudden, look at them. The same 4 people are making 20 gallons of soda. Why? Because they have better equipment to work with. Now, this can also happen if maybe the employees simply are given better training. All right, there's a lot of reasons why this curve can shift up, not just advancing technology. All right, so just keep in mind, now this is how our standards of living increase over time because technological progress, among other things, causes output to grow with the same resources. So this is where a lot of economic growth comes from technology. And again, the whole idea here is that output is growing even with the same resources. Okay, so somehow we're making better use of the same resources, and technology is certainly a major part of that. Even for potato chips, all right? Not exactly a high-tech product, and yet virtually every aspect of it is done with technology, except the actual growing of the potatoes themselves. And even then, machinery picks up all the potatoes out of the field when it's time to harvest them. You don't see people walking around the fields with buckets and putting potatoes in them. That would be horribly, horribly inefficient. They have these massive, massive machines that actually pick them up off the ground without smashing them. And it is fast. It is very fast. All right, so anyway, but the thing that surprised me to no end is the machine that is able to separate, you know, when you're making potato chips, some of them are bound to get burned. They have machines that actually take a photograph of every single potato chip. And if the color doesn't look right, when they get to the end, they have individual jets of air that will blow the bad looking ones into a separate vat than the good looking ones. It's just beyond belief how advanced it is. It's incredible how this is possible. The robot cameras are watching them all. And then all of a sudden, when they get to the end, the ones that don't look right are just with air pushed into a different bin and then thrown away. It's just beyond belief. Well, now all of this discussion ties in very nicely to what we're about to do next, which is to look at the labor market. And that poses an interesting question. Why do employers hire employees? What do they hope will happen if they do? Well, if somebody, let's say that you go to a job and they say, listen, here we are, we like you, we'll hire you. Here's, let's say $20 an hour to do this task. What does that tell you about the value the employer places on that product that you're producing? Well, clearly the product must be worth more, that you're making is worth more than $20 an hour to them. Okay, so if you go to work in the Wise potato chip factory and they pay you $20 an hour to work in quality control, it must be the case that whatever you're doing is adding more than $20 worth of value to the company by helping reduce the quantity of bad potato chips that are sent out. So labor, the demand for labor comes from employees, or employers rather, who think that whatever you're producing is worth more than they're paying you in the form of a wage. The supply of labor comes from individuals who are willing to work. Let's say, for example, you show up at Wise and you say, I'm willing to work for $20 an hour. What does that say about your decision, the way you value your free time? Well, clearly that $20 an hour is worth more to you than whatever you could have done by hanging around the house all day. So each side is working. There's the contract basically between the worker and the employee, the employer rather. And the bottom line is the employer thinks you're producing something that's worth more than they're paying you. The employee thinks that his time is worth less than the salary that he's getting. And so we bring that together and create an equilibrium where we determine the equilibrium wage in the economy and the equilibrium quantity of labor. Okay, so just like a traditional market for any good or service out there, there will be a supply curve for labor and there will be a demand curve for labor, and they will both have their traditional shape. Okay, downward sloping for labor, downward sloping for demand for labor, upward sloping for the supply of labor. All right, so I don't want to get too deeply into this and then have to start all over again on Thursday. So why don't we stop right about here? And then I've got some videos for us to look at involving the labor market. And we'll look at this very carefully. And it'll be very closely related to what we've already done when we analyze supply and demand. And so this is one of the many cases where supply and demand is a very helpful tool for analyzing a market. And this is one of those many, many cases. So we did say way back in the beginning that when we analyze supply and demand, that we'll keep seeing it over and over again throughout the course. This time it happens to apply to labor. Next time, who knows what it will apply to. But for today, I think we'll stop right here. And then unless there's any questions, we'll pick it up again on Thursday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Thank you.
See you next time.
Thank
Have a good day,
Thank you.
Professor.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
See you later. Oh, we have some questions. Okay. Oh, you're welcome. Yes.